Hello and welcome to the Newcastle Chronicle Facebook page where we're here doing a live talking all things transfer related. Please get your questions in. I know you're probably just trying to enjoy your lunch break. Last thing you probably want to do is to see me popping up, but we're here to have a chat about anything related to the summer window. Of course, entering the final 2 weeks, hard to believe that we're already at that stage of the window. Seems a long time since Matt Targett came in on a permanent deal with Newcastle, still pushing for an attacker, and the latest name, of course, is Joao Pedro, who Watford are maybe slightly changing their stance on. Of course, we brought to you earlier this week that they had made it very clear to Newcastle that he wasn't for sale. You wouldn't expect him to say anything else. He's a star player. He's a player they want to keep. But today, their manager, Rob Edwards, spoke to the media, and he basically said that any other bids that come in, they will sit down and discuss. He did make the point that Newcastle's opening bid, which I believe was in the region of £20 million, was nowhere near their evaluation of the player. But interestingly, he didn't come out and say, going to flat out reject any bids. He's not for sale. That wasn't the kind of language he was using. So it may just give Newcastle a little bit of encouragement, but important to stress, Watford, they don't have to sell him. He still has 5 years left on his contract. He's their star player. He's someone they want to build a team around to get promotion. So it'd be a really interesting one. I think it could rumble on into next week. Watford are playing Preston on Saturday, and by all accounts, Pedro will be playing in that game. He's a character who's not going to push for the move. He does want to come to the Premier League. He does want to join Newcastle United, but I think in a good way, he's not that sort of character who will kick up a fuss. So that's one that's Newcastle are pushing for. Of course, the loan market's going to heat up now as well in the final days of the window, in particular as those clubs start to finalise their 25-man squad. And really all eyes are on Chelsea, although Newcastle can only bring one player on loan from Chelsea because of the Premier League rules. They've interest in a number of players there. Christian Pulisic, of course, Conor Gallagher, and Armando Breuer, just to name three. There's also Callum Hudson-Odoi there. So Newcastle have basically made it clear to Chelsea, if you're going to let any of those players go, it would be effectively at the front of the queue waiting to come in for them. So that's definitely one to watch as the window goes on, and may lead to some outgoings too. Obviously, there are players at Newcastle who may struggle to get in the Premier League squad if they're to bring in two more players, but equally, if Newcastle sign young players like Pedro, they wouldn't take up a spot in the squad officially. So that could be a big help as well. So yeah, just reading your comments, please. Keep them coming in. Wayne instead of Ramos, and yeah, I mean the budget. It's a really interesting point you make there, because I think we can get caught up in budgets, and if the right players available, I do think Newcastle will sign them. But from what we can tell, I think it'd be one permanent and one loan if they were to bring in two players. I think it would be an either-or sort of situation, and Pedro seems the one they're pushing for the most at the moment on a permanent level. And then with the loans, they're looking at that Chelsea pool, and there'll be others as well who haven't emerged yet. But I don't think you can ever relent. And now, we saw with the Bruno deal in January that really, I don't think Newcastle went into January thinking that was necessarily going to be on the cards. And it was the final week of the window, things really heated up. And that's something to bear in mind as well with this summer. 2 weeks doesn't seem very long, but if you go back to January, the final week of the window, they signed Targett, Byrne and Bruno, and things start to open up. So the hierarchy seemed to be staying quite calm. They're going to keep pushing until deadline day to get business done, which already feels a step forward compared to a year ago in the Ashley era when, deadline day was a farce, wasn't it? Steve Bruce couldn't even bring in any players on loan. The last and only player they signed was Joe Willock, and that was, I think, August 13th, which is a good 2 weeks before the window even closed. So I think at least that they're going to keep pushing. There is a bit of a sense of calm around it. I think Eddie Howe made a point of saying Dan Ashworth had experience of being in this situation before. I thought that was quite an interesting comment, because they need to stay calm almost when the worst thing they could do really would be to panic and buy someone just for the sake of it who wouldn't really add to what they have, because I think that's what it has to be, the right player who can improve the team, who's a character who won't disrupt the dressing room, and then financially, of course, it has to be the right deal for them as well. But think I would be surprised if they were to get someone through the door by deadline day. It still feels a while away yet, so that's definitely one to keep an eye on. So yeah, keep your comments coming. Appreciate anyone tuning in to leave some feedback. So otherwise, yeah, got one here from Daniel. Yeah, I wonder, do they do it on purpose to keep everyone captivated or what have you? Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't rule it out. As we were saying, deadline day in January, Dan Burn and Matt Target both came in on January 31st, so it just could be happen. You know, it wouldn't surprise you if it went right to the final hours. Would like to throw money situation, possibly. So yeah, that's a good comment there. I mean, it's a balance, really. I think if you can hold your nerve, things can open up. You know, selling clubs might think, well, actually, we'll take the money now. But also, there is that temptation that you actually end up panicking a bit, you overpay. We go back to January, I think the Chris Wood deal was one that, you know, that 25 million they paid, they had to activate his release clause. I think Chris Wood did a job, certainly in the final few months of the season, but I think the players they're looking at now are sort of different sort of profile of younger players who can really grow with the club. Pedro is a perfect example of someone who Eddie Howe will feel with proper his sort of coaching that he can become a really, really, really good player. I know his numbers haven't really excited Newcastle fans, but I think under the right manager, he could really develop into a proper Premier League player. We don't want panic buy like Wood. Why not? Yeah, I mean, I think Chris Wood. It's a tricky one. If anyone you speak to around the club will say, without him, it would have been a different story in the second half of last season. I know it doesn't seem it, but the selfless work he did, the team play, I don't think it could be understated. But equally, goals are what he was going to always be judged on, and particularly when he had a pretty good record. You know, at least 10 Premier League goals in each season at Burnley. You have to say the service wasn't great for him as well. That didn't help him, but he was always going to be judged on goals. I think this season be used more on the bench, and it's going to be hard for him maybe to score 10 goals that way. But I think there will be games where he certainly will still play his part. So the first of many questions on Lucas Paqueta. No surprise there. I know at the start of the window he wasn't seen as someone who was a priority, someone they're well aware of. Obviously, Bruno's former teammate and best friend. I don't think it was a priority position to begin with. I know John Joe Shelby's injuries maybe changed things, but for me, I think they haven't got an endless budget, and if the money's going to be spent, it'll be spent on a forward player. I think they will, with Elliot Anderson coming in and impressing in pre-season. They have another midfielder there. I'd be surprised if they spent big on a midfielder personally. So another comment, Paqueta, yeah. Well, that's a good point. You know, his value could easily rocket. I think that's partly why they went for Bruno when they did. It was almost a bit opportunistic. That I genuinely don't think they thought at the start of the window he was going to be available, and they got him for a really good fee, and he's been an amazing signing. So there's an element with that Paqueta, but I just think where Newcastle are at now, they have to prioritise certain positions, and a forward, they just have to put the bulk of the resources there, because if they want to continue to spend in future windows, they can't go too crazy in this window. That's the financial rules. I know it's not sexy to say it. Rich. Yeah, just saying about the owners not paying. Yeah, that's very well put. I think it may seem that they're taking a huge risk if they don't bring in, say, as the previous person said there about Paqueta, but because of these profit and sustainability rules, if they were to spend a ridiculous amount this window and not bring enough revenue in as a result, i.e. not finishing higher up the table or not getting enough sponsorship deals in, it'll be really, really have a big impact and hamper them in windows to come. Whereas if they spend what they do this summer in January, they can look at the situation again in summer again. They can gradually build it as the years go on, and that seems to be the model. Because play Man City, of course, this weekend. When Man City were taken over by wealthy owners. Very different landscape. They could really spend without any fear of punishment. It's different now for Newcastle. So Pulisic and Gallagher, yeah, I mean they're two players they really like. Two loan players they'd be looking at, and I think it'll be the final days of the window that starts to open up for Newcastle. Really, Chelsea still have probably 2, if not 3, signings to make that will have a big bearing on their squad. One thing to bear in mind, particularly close to that end of the table, they can really take advantage of having 5 subs now. So they're going to carry bigger squads, and particularly young players who won't officially take up a place in the squad, they won't be against keeping them around because it's another option from the bench. So I think Pulisic might be a tough one for Newcastle to get. I think the interest in him is going to be immense. But what is in their favour is they've got that relationship with Chelsea. The both owners, sets of owners, I say, is both consortiums, isn't it? They get on very well. And Newcastle aren't yet seen as, a top 6 rival, even though I think the Chelsea chairman said it will become a top 7 with Newcastle. I think that will work in their favour. Whereas if Manchester United go in for Pulisic, I think Chelsea will be, more reluctant to do business with them, even though it doesn't seem Manchester United are a rival at the moment. So Gallagher has option to buy with fantastic addition. Yeah, and that's the point about the midfielder. With Shelby's injury, I don't think it's completely off the table to bring in a midfielder, particularly if they don't have to spend a transfer fee. And the real aim this summer is to add goals to the side. So I know people were a bit curious why James Maddison was a target. He's not naturally a right winger, but he would add so many goals and creativity to that team. I think Gallagher, it's kind of similar that, okay, he's not a forward, but from midfield he can score goals and help create opportunities and take the team up the pitch. So you can see why that they're interested in him. Bringing in no one else. I personally think they'll get at least one. I'd be very surprised if they didn't get at least one. I think there's an element that they'll only bring in the right player, as we mentioned earlier, that it has to be the right deal, the right character, a player who will actually improve what they have. But I do see them bringing in at least one. I could see them doing 2, as I said, a permanent and a loan. I would not rule that out. Come from Thomas, 2 up front if we get another forward. It gives them an option, doesn't it? I think he's quite wedded to the 4-3-3. I think that's worked really well for Newcastle since they've played it really regularly. The players, there's a good balance in that midfield, and I think up front, Wilson's Wilson. I think as much as he probably needs support at times, he's not really been using a 2-man partnership yet, really, in Newcastle. I think it's telling, Chris Wood hasn't been pushed up alongside him. I think it would give them an option, certainly, to play 2, but I think the person who come in will almost be learning from Wilson, or will be versatile enough to play across the front lines, depending on who's injured or the kind of team they're playing against. But personally, I see them sticking with the 4-3-3, really moving forward. Why not Wood and Wilson? Yeah, I think it's something. I remember asking Eddie Howe about when Chris Wood came in. He felt that they could play together, just take them time to build up an understanding. But I think he's cooled a little bit on that. Where the team is at, it would make Newcastle so much more open if they're effectively playing 4-4-2. But I think there will be times when Wood is brought on where Newcastle need a goal that they might keep both of them on, but maybe a little bit telling they haven't really been used from the start together yet. And another comment in here. Brilliant. Thank you for all your comments. So just looking ahead to the City game, better team together, but City's always, yeah. I think the City game it's another. I think the Nottingham Forest game, we hadn't seen Newcastle be that dominant in years. Brighton was maybe more of a kind of better gauge of where they're at against a team who finished above them in the league, and City will be similar. But I think even if Newcastle lose the game, if they're more competitive, if they're able to ask more questions of City than they did last season, that will be a massive thing for them. It's not an easy game, but I think Newcastle's defense is so much better now. I don't see them losing by 4 like they did last season, or 5-0 in Manchester. I think they've got a strong defence, and that's a real foundation. Now it's just whether they can pose a threat on the break. And I think that game against Arsenal last season, everyone remembers, that's really the template. It shows what Newcastle can do to some of the very best sides in the Premier League. So I think that's everything. Really appreciate all you coming on and listening to me drone on and putting in your questions. It's always a pleasure to hear from you all, and stick with us. I mean, it's going to be a really interesting few weeks. Just the final 2 weeks now of the window. Newcastle, of course, playing City on Saturday. We'll hear from Eddie Howe tomorrow, who will give an update on where they are at with the transfers. So keep an eye on everything on Chronicle Live. And yeah, thank you for tuning in.